All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream. I am your host, Jeff Freeman, and right over here is my co-host, Jack Campbell. Jack, how you doing today?
Good afternoon, Jeff. I'm doing real well.
Great. I tell you what, finally have some nice weather out here today. And folks, I'm really, really excited about our special guest that we'll have coming on here in just a couple of moments. But before we do, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping, some of the things that we like to go through, which is talking about our YouTube channel we have out there, JFree906. If you're out there on JFree906, if you would, please subscribe. Click that subscribe button for us. And if you want to get information about when we have new content coming on, click that notification bell and you'll get some information right away. We're also over on the Twitch side today. We're doing Twitch TV. We're out there as well. It's JFree906. And we also have our Patreon page. It's up there. It's also JFree906. That's JFREE 906. If you want to help support the show, and we really, really appreciate that very, very much. So Jack and I have been talking about this for a long time, and the fact that we also have Jan Anderson, one of our moderators. We have Linda, our admin for the group, out there working today. So we really appreciate all the hard work that they do, and for the show and keeping us going. And if I tell you what, folks,
keep us in line, Jeff.
Yeah, they do. They keep us in line. That's absolutely right. So, but we really appreciate them very much. And of course, we appreciate you here being here today with us. Jack and I have been talking about the fact we were very excited about having, we've been working on Skinwalker Ranch, and the show that I'm super excited about. So many really interesting things happening at Skinwalker Ranch that need answers. And we have a wonderful team out there. And we have one of the members of that team here with us today, Thomas Winterton. And I'd like to bring him on right now to the stream. Thomas, hey, welcome. And thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks, guys. It's great to join you.
Really love having you here.
Yeah, I tell you, we really are. We've had quite a few people asking us, some questions. We always put out a little bit ahead of time questions and tell people, hey, if you have any questions for our guests, go ahead and let us know so we can ask them during the show. And so we've got a good list of questions. Quite a few people were interested in meeting you today and getting to hear what you have to share with us. And again, that's what this is all about, because we know that on the show, we get 40 minutes per episode. And so much of that is the film that's done, hours and hours and hours of video that's taken with you guys doing your research. A lot of that ends up on the cutting room floor, and we get to see a short, snippets of 40 minutes per episode, which doesn't really tell the full story. And that's why we like to have you guys come on, because this is the opportunity for you to come on and explain more of that story to us that we don't get to see, because we know there's so much more to it than that. And I'm assuming that's the case for Skinwalker Ranch as well. What I'd like to do is start off with a little bit of your background, Thomas. Now, you're a resident of the area, correct?
Yeah. So I was born here in Roosevelt, which my home that I was born in is 6 miles from from the ranch, the way the crow flies. And I've, with the exception of a few years at college and a few years to serve an LDS mission, I've lived here the rest of my life. So I've been here almost, 36 years. Wow.
And during that time, I would imagine that, if you're only 6 miles away from Skinwalker Ranch area, you're still within the Uintah Basin, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. The Uintah Basin is, it starts about over there, Fruitland, Duchesne area on the west, and runs all the way through Vernal on the east. And so it's 60, 80 miles long.
Wow. Yeah. It looks like we've seen some of the pictures. I've got a few pictures just in case we need to pull them up. Everybody knows when they watch my shows, they know I love to do my visuals, and I have a lot of pictures from the show. And there's a picture of that basin showing just about how large it is, from like a satellite view.
So you've known about just a lot of it your whole life, haven't you? Really, bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, some of my earliest memories is I've had family members that have had some very remarkable, really scary, traumatizing events that have taken place.
Wow.
And growing up, you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of people that have lived here for very many years in the basin that haven't had some type of unexplained experience. They've happened frequently, and they've happened for decades. So these ones that happened to family members happened in the late 70s. So it's been going on a long time.
Wow. Yeah, and that's something too that we we know that, we were introduced to the late Junior Hicks, and meeting his on the show, meeting some of his family, Ward and Janalee,
Mm-hmm.
and his granddaughter. And I think we were actually saw just recently on last episode. I think we met I think it was his grandson, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Was on the show. And I tell you, Junior had gone around over years collecting a lot of information. Did you know him have you known him for years, or did you know him for many years in his family?
Yeah, so that was actually my first exposure to Skinwalker Ranch. Junior actually just lived up the street from my dad's brother.
Oh, wow.
And at the height of the activity during the time that the Shermans were on there, Junior would go out and investigate those sightings. And so living next to my uncle, he would share the stories of what was going on there. And that was my first exposure to Skinwalker Ranch, of learning what it was actually through Junior Hicks talking to my uncle. And Junior was incredible. Even before I knew him as an investigator, I mean, he had this old Chevy truck. He was an electrician. He was also a science teacher that taught up the junior high up there, right above the ranch, actually. And he's documented this. I want to say 70 years, but that may be incorrect. But at least 50 years, he has gone around. And I think the thing that surprised me is that Junior, I knew that he's investigated and that he's gone around and interviewed all the people, but I had no idea until his family brought his collection. When we started flipping through his documentation, I don't know that there's another collection like it in the entire world. And he was meticulous, and being a science teacher, he followed the scientific process.
Yep.
And so what we have is you have all these sightings where they filled out the exact same form, answered the same questions, went through the same procedure. And he was very thorough in the way that he conducted the interview, even wanting to make sure that if there are multiple witnesses, that he interviewed them separately, so his collection is absolutely stunning. And when we started going through all of the documentation, and then obviously when I came on the ranch, Bigelow didn't turn over any data to Brandon.
Yeah,
nothing.
That's a shame too. Yep.
Well, on one sense, it is a shame, and on the other sense, it's actually a blessing, because we started with a blank slate.
That's true. Yep.
You had no presumptions going into what was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So like our view wasn't tainted by anything that they had or had not witnessed. We really were starting with a blank slate. Because of that, and because so many of the people associated with the Bigelow era are under non-disclosures and can't speak with us, we really were starting from square one. Yep. Junior Hicks was one of those people that Bigelow brought onto the ranch to come and investigate some of these things. So, matter of fact, Mr. Bigelow actually flew Junior Hicks down to his aerospace and had Junior speak at one of his events down there in Vegas. So Bigelow had a lot of respect for Junior Hicks. Junior Hicks had a lot of respect for Mr. Bigelow. There was a friendship there, and when things would happen, they would have Junior come out. And so Junior was one of those he was one of the few people that we could get a hold of that had been there when Bigelow was there, that could tell us some of the things that had happened. And Junior was he was a really down to earth, very credible guy. I mean, he didn't, I never got the feeling that he ever embellished or that he ever, he was very factual. He just repeated it as it had been told to him.
Yep.
And so we brought him on. We actually had the privilege. We brought him on before the television series even. Brandon, Junior was getting up into his 90s at that time when we took over the ranch, and we couldn't afford to lose all of that history. So Brandon actually hired a biographer to come out, and Junior sat down and had done a lot of recorded a lot of his stories.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got Junior Hicks, where we've actually had him come out and film several times unrelated to the show. And then obviously when we were getting ready to film the series, we brought him on again. But yeah.
Wow.
I think the one thing that really impressed me with what Junior Hicks did was that when he had the people do the drawings, you know, of what they saw and everything else. And then when you guys went back and looked, there were 2 or 3 instances where it was identical drawings, but from different people, different times, and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, there's so much phenomena surrounding UFOs or UAPs, whatever term you'd like to use.
Yep.
I think one of the things that stood out to me, and quite honestly, this is one of the mysteries that I see out of the ranch, is we've had many UAP sightings out there. And the interesting thing is sometimes we see them and the cameras don't. Sometimes we've had groups of people there where half the group could see it and the other half couldn't.
Wow.
We've had times where their group saw it, or there was a group half saw, half didn't, and the cameras got it, to where you have to wonder, you know, why does this take place? So
why do some people not see it? Yeah.
With Junior, what made his data so remarkable is not only did he take, I mean, you kind of saw a glimpse of all the drawings that he'd have people sketch these out.
Right.
Right.
But then he took and compiled that into a database. And so he's showing us, like, okay, so there's been 500 sightings, and of those 500 sightings, 321 of them were cigar shaped, and, you know, 20 of them were this shape, and he has it all. So did they make sound?
Right.
You know, all of that stuff. So it's remarkable. And Junior was an icon around here. He had this old Chevy pickup. He was an electrician, and you just saw him around town doing, I mean, he worked as an electrician clear up until, I mean, late 80s. So he's just a remarkable guy, but he was an icon in the area, and we definitely miss him.
Yeah, I was going to say he would be somebody that I would love to have met, and his research and the way his methodology, as it was explained at least to us on the show, and you kind of elaborated on it just a little bit there about a form that he would use. So he kept everything standardized. You know, he didn't, ask these guys this question and these folks this question. It was all standardized. That way you can collect that data and analyze it in a better fashion, rather than, scattering of information from different questions that may have been asked. And that methodology that's the science teacher in him right there, speaking for
Right.
that. And I can't wait, because we know that Tom and Candace now have, or that, that data was brought and given to them. We just saw that on I think it was the last episode. And so now they're going to be able to, again, and maybe even go a little farther than he did with his database, and find out, what was the weather like each time things were found, or was it at nighttime, or what time of day was it, or, whatever, and put all this together to get a better picture of when these things show up. Because I know you guys are out there, and I know that the term kicking the hornet's nest or poking the hornet's nest comes up quite a bit, but, and you're trying to get something like that to happen. And so if you can look at that data and go, oh, well, it seems like we get more things happening between, 6 o'clock, and I know he had some of that. It did show some of that, but it just helps when you can collect that data and put that together. And I know that, is Eric going to be involved in that at some point, Eric Bard?
Oh, Eric, matter of fact, I think Candace and Tom took it, but all of that will be turned over to Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Everything goes through Eric, and Eric is extremely organized, very meticulous. But ultimately our hope is, look, we're excited to get it to help us with our investigation. But when the Hicks family was there, and they knew Junior was into this, but they're busy with their lives, and I don't think to me it was apparent when they came, they didn't understand the value of what it was that they had.
Right.
And as we visited with them, Travis just kept reinforcing, you guys don't know what you have here. Like, and so ultimately it's my hope, it's all of our team's hope. We're happy to have that data help us with our investigation, but I really hope that the family will compile it and put it out for everybody, because I would like that to, I would like everybody to be able to have access to what Junior, to his lifetime's work. So my hope is the family will take a serious effort in trying to compile it and publish it in a way that everybody can have access to it.
Now, on the last episode, were these additional cases? I thought they said they found 200 more records that they gave you that were additional from what they had given you before.
Yeah. And see, he's just got, when they came, he literally has boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. So I think it is a little overwhelming to look at it, but I know there's people out there that are good at that kind of thing. And my hope is that the family can team up with somebody that can really show honor and do it, do it the good it deserves.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that there's millions of people out there would love to be able to see the result of that too. And I'm one of them. I know that we would all like to see that, because anytime, and we'll get to it a little bit later, when you got to meet Linda Howell, when she came out to the ranch. And again, she's one of these people that have been investigating this type of stuff for many, many years. And like I said, we'll get to that when we get to that portion, but it's invaluable. We need that information. And so many people are hungry to find out exactly what that's all about. What I'd like to do is jump back just a little bit. You had mentioned, being on the ranch, before the filming started. What was your initial role? I mean, when you met, let's ask that. How did you meet Brandon and get involved with him?
So Brandon bought the ranch in April of 2016. And immediately, well, matter of fact, when Brandon first came out here, he brought with him Jim Morse, and you've seen Jim Morse on TV. He was the ranch manager, but he's a very successful real estate developer in Salt Lake, and Jim has spent his life working with Native Americans. He's raised hundreds of millions of dollars for the Native American Scholarship Fund. So when Brandon bought this Skinwalker Ranch, which obviously derives its name from the Native American legend, Brandon reached out to Jim, knowing that Jim has a lot of connections and relations, and asked him if he would accompany him out here and figure out, exactly what this was. Because remember, he bought it from Bigelow, and you can Google it, but he wasn't sure quite what he was getting. And so the first week that Jim came out here to start to figure out what this was for Brandon, my wife and I own a small luxury hotel here in Roosevelt, and Jim rolled into town. It was funny. It was actually on a Sunday, and I'd been at church, and I got called out of church because one of my guests was having problems with their TV. And so I came down to help them fix their TV, and I was just coming out of the room when Jim rolled into the parking lot. And so we met, he introduced himself, and we got talking, and he found out that I was a general contractor here in the state of Utah, as a licensed contractor. And he said, I'm representing an individual who I can't tell you who it is, but he bought this Skinwalker Ranch. Have you ever heard of it? I'm like, yeah, I've heard of the ranch. Used to try to sneak on there when I was in high school. And he said, well, where you're a licensed contractor, maybe you could come out and do an inspection for us. We have no idea where any of the facilities are sitting. And if you'd come out, and I was like, yeah, of course, because it's been locked down. And so, the idea of being able to go on someplace that nobody else has been able to go on to was fun. So I went on there, and unfortunately, a lot of the facilities on the ranch were in a state of disrepair, needed a lot of attention. We had a few legal issues that were pending against the ranch. For example, the road that actually went through the ranch was a public easement. And for years, Bigelow had kept it locked, which is illegal in Utah. You can't lock a public easement.
Right.
And so as soon as Brandon bought it, the county reached out and said, hey, you can't be locking this up. And we panicked a little bit, because how can you conduct a scientific investigation when you've got a thoroughfare right through the middle of it? It would have been a complete catastrophe.
Wow.
I have a lot of deep political connections here in the basin, having lived here my whole life. And my dad was a county commissioner in Duchesne County. The ranch is in the neighboring county, but I've worked closely with all of them. And so I went through the process, and Brandon, wishing to remain anonymous, he made me the representative for the ranch. And so I went through the legal process and got that road vacated and deeded back to us so we could shut it down. And at that point, Brandon just asked me if I would stay on and run it. You know, Jim lives in Salt Lake, and Brandon is out there in the Salt Lake area. And so Brandon just said, where you're out there, and my job with the hotel gave me the flexibility and the freedom to be able to do both. And so I took over. And so I've been there pretty much since the beginning of May of 2016.
Wow.
And, I came on excited to be able to rub shoulders with Brandon, Brandon is a very successful figure in Utah. And, for me, it was more of the novelty than anything. I came on as a complete skeptic. I believe that what we had was a bunch of hyped
Which
stories.
is good in a way to have that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I remember going on the first time, and the ranch is a very beautiful, scenic place. But I remember going on and thinking, I don't know what the big deal is. But I did have a couple experiences early on that I wrote off. Just kind of, you find a way to compartmentalize it and rationalize it and write it away. But as I've been on there, and then the things start to mount, and then my injury happened, and it got to the point that I couldn't, at some point you have to say, one time can be a coincidence, maybe 10 times can be a coincidence. We're at 100. I don't know how it's still a coincidence.
Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I know you just talked about it, and I don't know what your feelings are about the injury. Obviously they talk about it on the show quite a bit, but I mean, that was pretty devastating. I mean, that, and this happened obviously before the filming, right before the show was taking place. When was that about, if you don't mind? I don't know. Like, again, I don't know your feelings about talking about that, but when did
I don't
that
mind talking about the generalities of it. I don't mind talking about.
Okay. Yep.
There is a lot surrounding my injury that I don't feel comfortable talking about. I will tell you that it turned my world upside down, and pre-injury and post-injury are two different worlds for me, the way that I view the world. There were things that took place during and after my injury that I just, frankly, even to this day, have a hard time.
Wow.
I don't know that I've even come to terms with them yet, but it happened. So my injury took place. It actually started on my birthday, so it's really easy for me to remember it.
Wow.
That was the first time that So March 4th of 2017 was, and that happened to be a Saturday, and my wife and I had been at a family member's funeral all day. So we'd been sitting in a church house at a funeral service, and then with family, and we came home, had a little cake and ice cream, and then went to bed. And when I laid down, I had a really, really tender spot, and it was on the lower back part of my head right here, and I laid down, was like, oh, just the touch of the pillow hurt it. And I thought, I don't remember getting hit there.
Right.
But I didn't think anything of it. But when I woke up Sunday morning, that tender spot had swollen up, and it was like a really tight goose egg, and, about the size of a 50-cent piece. And I just thought, I must have had an insect bite or a spider bite.
Right.
And I'm reacting to that. So I didn't think anything of it. As Sunday wore on, I started to have other physical effects. I started getting nauseous, headache, just almost feeling flu-like, but a more severe strain of that. And my wife was like, maybe we should go have you checked. And I'm the guy that, you take me to the hospital when I'm unconscious, because I don't go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, no, it's just an insect bite. Just let it run its course. It'll be fine. I'm not relatively, I am very healthy. So it continued to get worse. And finally, I got so sick through Monday, she was starting to get adamant like, we need to take you in. And I said, look, it's probably just like a black widow or something. Like, let my body fight it. I'll get over it. And Tuesday morning, that bump had spread all the way through my head. And what would happen is there was fluid that was coming in, and it would get so tight that it would peel the fatty tissue away from my skull.
Ugh.
And so it literally scalped me. And by the time she woke up Tuesday morning, it had spread all the way through my head, and I had a purple line right across my forehead here where it had peeled it away. And the rest of the head was pretty expanded. And by the time we got to the hospital, it continued down into my eyes, to where by Tuesday afternoon, I could pretty much grab my hair and walk my scalp around my head, completely separate. And so, this whole injury took place the beginning of March. It was the end of February, so like a week or two earlier, that the U.S. evacuated all of the embassy workers from Cuba, what they're calling now the Havana syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
There's a lot of similarities there. And,
Wow.
The time frame is the same. So now,
Really? Oh my goodness.
why some farm kid in middle of nowhere, Utah, is experiencing this is, definitely baffling. But the only connection here is that I'm on this ranch that's been watched and studied by the Pentagon and by a lot of 3-letter agencies, and and I'm the manager of that. So, anyways,
Wow.
yeah.
I tell you what, and you said, you talked about the fact that you've been changed since then, and I know that, and again, we'll probably elaborate on it a little bit more when we get there, but when you had the experience with Travis was having an experience and you were like, guys, I'm getting a headache, I'm out of here. And that was, I mean, you probably wouldn't, if this hadn't happened, you'd be thinking, oh, a headache, whatever, I'm going to hang out. But knowing that now, you're like, I'm not hanging around. And I'm all for you. You got in the car and our Jeep and you took off. And I'm glad you did, because obviously you don't want something like that to happen again. It was very, life threatening. I mean, I can imagine that.
Well, and we'd had, the thing you don't see on the show is we actually, you were mentioning earlier about how much filming we do. And, I did the math just for fun the other day, 14 weeks of filming, 5 days a week, averaging 12 hours a day. And then you think that we run an average of 3 to 4 cameras during the day.
Right.
We're literally, what you're seeing on TV is less than 0.009% of what we shot.
I knew it had to be something crazy like that. Oh my goodness.
So there's a statistic for you. What you're seeing on the 10 episodes, 470 minutes, you can do the math, but you're seeing 0.009% of what we shot.
Wow.
And there's just so much that ends up on the cutting floor. I got extremely sick after we dug. I forget which episode it was, when we were out there digging and the metal detector was going off on the dirt.
Mm-hmm. Was so it season 2 or?
Yeah, season 2.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. We're out there. I was out there with the little mini excavator, and that was the weirdest thing. We were out there for a long time, because that stuff happens. And this is the thing the camera doesn't pick up is, even though we have a television show to make, we have the science side of this, right? Mm-hmm. So the first question is our metal detector malfunctioning? So then we have to go through the process of making sure we're not getting the metal detector is giving us accurate things, and turning it off and resetting it and testing it, putting stuff down in the dirt, seeing, like, we go through all of this, and then and we're still getting it. And what you're seeing on TV is just like the brief snippets, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So we started doing, we dug this, and that process, we were out there for a long time. And I started to feel funny, like as we were getting towards the end of it, I started to feel really, we'll use Travis's term, swimmy headed. Mm-hmm. And I could feel something going on. And it was so fascinating because that soil, the metal detector would be beeping, and then Eric's lightning detector would go off.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the metal detector wouldn't pick anything up. It would go dead.
It would stop. Yeah, exactly.
A short period of time later, the metal detector would start beeping, and Eric's thing would go off, and then it was so this repeated, which it looked like the ground was collecting a charge, and it would build up, and then it would discharge, and then it would go back to. And the interesting thing is, see, Caleb has a taser with him, and we thought maybe the lightning detector, so part of it was Caleb actually took his taser out, and he could take the attachment off, pull the trigger, and cause the sparks, right? That wasn't setting Eric's lightning detector off. So when a taser put fairly close to that is not setting that off, but then the soil is, that's where the strange things go. And that's where I feel like some of the story is lost, is when you start getting into the details of what we did behind the scenes. But I ended up getting really sick. Travis got sick. So the very next morning after digging that, I was so sick that like I required help to get out of bed. My wife had to help me out of bed. And I would have called in sick, but we have such a tight filming schedule out there. And some of these people travel long distances to get to the ranch. We can't reschedule them. We can't bump them to the next day because we've already got the next day scheduled.
Right.
So we have a very tight schedule that we're adhering to. And there was no way for me to call in sick. So I went in and I forced myself all day. And the next day the cameras go down, and I told the guys, I said, I'm not doing very good, guys. Like I'm sicker than shit. And Travis was like, oh my gosh, dude. He's all, this morning when I woke up, I was done. He's all, I was packing my stuff up. I got in the Jeep, and he said, I was sitting there ready to drive off this ranch and never come back.
Wow.
And so, say what you want, but whatever we did digging out there at the triangle, we had some serious after effects of that you don't see on TV.
Wow. And yet, you were given, you guys talked about this with Brandon, be able to get permission to do the digging. And I know that was a big sticking point because of what happened with you in the past, partly what happened with you in the past. And then to know that, because we did not get that, they did not talk about any of that on the show. Obviously, we didn't know, we seen at one point, I think if this is the same digging that you're talking about, when we seen Candace down in the hole, she had gone down in there. Was that when you were digging those?
That was actually a separate exercise.
Okay.
Yep. Because we went out to the triangle. We'd picked up something with the GPR. Well, matter of fact, we had James Keenan come out.
Yep.
And James Keenan had done the measurements across there. That's when we noticed some anomalies there. So I think he had a magnetometer. I can't remember what his instrument was. And so then we brought Zach out to do the GPR, the ground penetrating radar.
Right.
And we picked something up. That's why we chose to dig there. Our team, me personally and Eric, we're not opposed to digging, but this is Prometheus, right? That's producing this show that obviously does Curse of Oak Island. And the one thing we were nervous about when we signed on to do this is we didn't want to be Curse of Oak Island version 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
We didn't want to just be plugging holes around the ranch for the sake of television. Right. And so one of the big things is that, yes, we're willing to dig. One, if we take the proper safety precautions, and two, if the data leads us there. We don't want to just go popping holes in the ground to pop holes in the ground.
Right.
So in this case, we had the magnetometer that had indicated something unusual. We brought Zach in with to do the GPR, the ground penetrating radar showed that there was something there. So then we brought in the mini excavator and did some light digging. But that was separate from the exercise that you saw where we were over in the field where the cow died.
Yes.
And then further down into the corner.
Yep. Now, when you had that experience where you were digging and that ruler, just kept moving, Candace never had any reaction to that or anything down there when she was down there?
Not that I'm aware of. She never mentioned anything to us.
Yeah, but that was a different time. But yeah, and while we're on this subject, that's something very interesting as well. And I get myself, I'm involved in a lot of different things, not only with the UAPs or UFOs, but also with paranormal and things. And I've learned over the years that there are people that are susceptible to certain stimulus, whether that be electromagnetic fields or whether that be, something paranormal, whatever it may be. Not everyone is susceptible to the same. It may be the amount of some particular occurrence of something, stimuli from something. And it seems like, you take Dragon, for instance, or Eric, you guys could all four, you with Travis, all four be working in a particular area. You and Travis are affected by it physically, but not Eric and Dragon. So you look at that and you're thinking, what is the difference between, your physiology? What is the difference between you and them and Travis and them that is creating that? And that's something that's another area of investigation that I'd like to know. What do you, I mean, it seems like you and Travis are both very, he got affected by the signals, or you both did. You left the ranch, then he was over in his trailer and he was watching some stuff. And then he kind of just got that, what'd you call it? Swimmy head feeling.
Swimmy headed. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he lost his train of thought. He couldn't get his thoughts back. He was feeling the tingly. And immediately then, of course, Dragon jumps right in, because that's part of his job. And his concern is that, I'm going over there. And he goes over to the trailer and he's telling, and again, you guys in your different areas have to have some of the most difficult jobs. And that's a difficult job for Dragon right there, because part of his job is to keep everybody safe as well as he can. So he goes over there. He's telling Travis, we need to get you out of here. And Travis is like, oh no, it'll go, it'll be fine. No, we need to do something with you right now, and, for him to try to force that, I mean, he's doing the best he can. But then going inside the silo, and I call it a Faraday cage, you're getting inside of a metal enclosure, and then boom, it goes away. Had something like that, had you ever tested that before, going inside of a silo or anything like that before? Or was that the only time that occurrence happened?
No, you know what? That was really smart on Travis's part. Sometimes you have those incidents where you're like, duh, like, why didn't I think of that? That, so obvious. But actually, so that particular incident, though, we got two good pieces of data. And I'm actually glad that I left the ranch, and I'm glad that Travis went in there, because here's the deal. When I was in the control room and we're starting to monitor this high spike in the RF, my head started to have what I call pins and needles. Very similar to like when one of your limbs goes to sleep and then the blood flow recurs. Okay. And it felt like pins and needles all over my scalp. It was a pins and needles sensation. It didn't necessarily hurt, but it was a really creepy feeling sensation where it felt like all the hair follicles were reacting to something, right? Then, so I'm sitting there like this is all going on, and I'm feeling this, and I'm consciously aware of this going on. So part of my thoughts as I'm sitting there in that room is like, what is going on right now? This is crazy. But then the part that scared me is I started to feel a really strong pounding behind one side. I don't remember if it was my right side or my left side, but inside my head, I started to feel pretty good pounding headache. And that's when I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. Now, I jumped in and I left.
Deja vu all over again.
Well, interestingly enough, my other injury, so I had a small reoccurrence of it in season 1. We were out there camping in the field. That, like, it comes, I can't explain it, but it's more of an external. It's outside the skull or outside the scalp, but it is inside. It's hard to describe, but the pounding headache actually is not. It's a different pain point than my injury.
Were you at the Mesa when that happened, if I remember correctly?
In season 1?
Yes.
We were actually camping right next to the bait pen there in the field.
Oh, yeah, right.
And we were doing the experiment with the laser pointed towards the mesa.
Right.
And then we saw the infrared beam off to the west. And that's when, and then we were holding up a board what we were trying to do is get a direction on where this was coming from. And that's when my head, and that sensation was identical to my first injury. And that's what worried me about that was it was in the exact same spot, and it felt the same. So that one was worrisome. But in season 2, when I left the ranch, now this is the data that we got out of that. I mean, some of it. was as I drove away from the ranch out towards the main road, that pins and needles sensation got less and less and less, to where by the time I got to the main road to go into Fort Duchesne, the pins and needles sensation had subsided. It was gone.
Oh.
The headache persisted for several more hours, but the pins and needles was gone. While the pins and needles were gone for me, Travis was having his episode simultaneously over there in his place. So, and then when I got back, we went through and we matched up the timelines. So the sensation disappeared on me, but it was actually still just intense, or if not more intense, on the ranch at the same time. So what that tells us is one, Travis went into the silo and it alleviated it immediately. Like you said, a Faraday cage. So that is an important piece of data to tell us what we're dealing with. And the second thing is we get asked all the time, is this just happen on the ranch or like, does it happen other places too? Well, the entire Uintah Basin is a hotbed of strangeness. There's things that happen basin wide, but there does seem to be, the ranch seems to be an epicenter for a lot of this activity. And I do believe we witness things on that ranch that we don't witness other places. Well, here is one specific instance that we have where we have some pretty strong data to suggest that it was focused right there where we were at on the ranch. As I got further away, the symptoms went away and they were still happening on the ranch. So that would suggest that for some reason, the ranch is the focus of some of this activity and it's not happening off the ranch.
Right. Wow. And it does seem to be
considered the silos, taking any of them with you when you go out of some of these experiments.
Well, we talked about that. Maybe make it a smaller version of it that you could have and take it when you're doing an experiment. When something happens, have somebody jump into it real quick. Not a silo, but maybe a metal, structure of some sort. You make it a portable Faraday cage where you could jump into it. Had anybody thought about that before?
Yeah, we've actually had a lot of discussion about different methods that we could use to protect ourselves. I mean, you got those heat blankets, like in the case the firefighters carry that are supposed to reflect, right? Kind of the aluminum, or they're even in 72-hour survival kits where they're supposed to reflect your body heat in. Something as simple as that could reduce or minimize the effects. So we've talked about that, and I actually think that moving forward, that's something that we'll probably have in place.
Yeah. You had those. I know that Brandon gave you all those bio, like a watch, that you were wearing that would keep your data, track your data. Are you guys still using something like that, or has that been? I know you wore them for a while there.
Let me just say that the lawyers have really messed up a lot of things in this country, and I say that because there are a lot of we're biosensors out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just like the cattle are.
If you start to measure something, or there's a lot of things that I would assume that we would like to do out there. However, if you're monitoring something and let's just put that if it's perceived at all that we're guinea pigs, there raises a huge liability issue for everyone involved. And so it's frustrating because I feel like you start getting liability issues and insurance issues and all these lawyer issues involved, and it gets in the way of us being able to do hard science. And we've all signed liability waivers and all that, but that doesn't matter if it's perceived that you're putting somebody in harm's way intentionally. Right. And so our hands are so tied on a lot of this stuff as far as what we can and can't do. It's frustrating. Yeah.
And I know Jenny asked a question here and that I wanted to kind of touch on too. She's on our YouTube side. And she asked a question. I'm going to bring up this picture real quick, and it shows it's what I was talking about earlier about like a satellite image of the basin. And see if I can bring this up here real quick. This was one portion that was on the show, and I believe this is when you were actually in Salt Lake in Brandon's office conference room there. And then there was another picture right after this that showed roughly where the Skinwalker Ranch is in relation to the basin. In now, it's hard for us to tell its actual location in the basin. Is it? I'm assuming it's not like in the center. Is in your experience or knowing the area, where is it generally located as far as the basin is concerned?
No, actually, that's the strange thing is that the ranch itself lies almost dead center.
Oh, does it really? Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's the ranch sits right at the bottom of that bowl. So
Wow.
that's obviously one of the things we're looking at is how much does geography and topography play into this?
Yep. And I think that's an important, and that was a good question to ask, Jenny. Thank you so much for that. But you're right. If it is, and I think that, and I know that in season 1, Travis was talking about it when he mentioned about the wormhole and the folding of space and that sort of thing, which really isn't as far out as some people are like, what is he talking about? No, I think that was pretty good to bring that up. But that knowing that if you thought about it as if it were like a satellite dish, okay, and where's the concentration point going to be? A satellite dish takes that info, that signal or whatever you want to call it, and focuses it to a certain point. The center is going to be the hottest point, and if that's where the ranch is, oh yeah, that's totally significant. Absolutely, yeah, without a doubt, that's significant. There's another picture there, and I forget what this particular one, how this was, pulled together, but yeah, that's really significant that it is in the center, almost there, or in the center of the basin. Wow.
Yeah, this is something that the scientists have looked at a lot. Travis actually, if I remember right, Travis did his doctorate dissertation on the craters on the moon and being able to use those. But Travis is very familiar with that type of principle, and that's one of the things that he has spent a lot of time saying that he believes that there may be something to do with the ranch being in the center and the Uintah Basin acting like a big parabola, big focus spot where this energy is being focused.
Wow. And the experiments that you guys have done, I mean, especially this season 2 that's just wrapping up, and we'll talk about this as we go along here, but the experiments like with the Tesla coil, let's go ahead and jump into that. Talking about the Tesla coil experiment, and this is something that I remember sending you a text message after we saw that episode. And I was asking you a question about, it was the battery. When you were doing the battery, you were out at, I believe it was Homestead 2, and you were hooking up to the well, and then you were hooking up to a rod you had put in the ground some 60, 70 feet away. And then you were running juice or, electricity through the ground with that battery. And I had asked I had heard Travis say in the meeting with Brandon that it continued after we disconnected. I wasn't sure if he was talking about that, but that was, and because he had it hooked up to a flashlight and the flashlight was lighting up. So was that, obviously the ground is able to conduct electricity through it. So I wonder if that happens in the rest of the basin, or, it seems obvious that it's happening right there. Was that what he was talking about when disconnecting and you were still getting readings even after the power was disconnected? Was that the incident?
Yeah. So there's another perfect example. We spent a lot of time out there doing that experiment, and on TV, it appears like we showed up, threw the rods in the ground, looked at the Grand Canyon for 10 seconds, said, okay, let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually, we actually did many different experiments that day, put the rods at different points. We actually pounded some rods in at different lengths of points. So we spent a lot of time on this experiment. And again, here's a time when Eric's lightning detector keeps going off. And another time when we take that taser, because we're like, if it's picking up electrostatic discharge, that taser ought to be activating that lightning detector. It should be going crazy, but it wasn't. It didn't. And so and then we're dealing with a little 12-volt battery. Obviously it's got some significant amps to it, but we at one point, we had the voltage meter set up there, and Eric and Travis had some different instrumentation that were looking at a lot of different things, not just the voltage, but we disconnected the battery and continued to measure current,
See, that's
which
what's significant.
indicated that somehow that ground was storing a charge.
Yep. Wow. And ground just doesn't do that. It just doesn't. Not normal in any other area. It's not going to do that. It may allow some to pass through, and I think even Travis had mentioned something about it being in the billions, supposed to be like 0.00000 something in the billions or trillions. You might get a little bit of current coming through there if the electricity, if the amount of amperage you're putting through the ground is high enough, you're going to get a trickle. But they were getting a third of an amp coming through there, which that should not be happening. And it's interesting to note that, and again, we talked about this earlier about the amount of filming and the work that you guys do. It's almost a disservice to the fact that you guys are conducting all these other experiments and changing your experiment as you go along, trying different things. We don't see any of that, but then again, it's not a 12-hour show. It's only a 1-hour show, and we get 40 minutes. Wow. That's really interesting to know that you had worked on that for so much time. And for that lightning detector, now that's something. I'm in the rental business. We do rentals of safety equipment. So lightning detectors are one of the things that our company deals with. And I brought that up when I remember the very first time that he had talked about the lightning detector going off. And we're thinking, okay, there's no lightning in the area, and it takes a pretty good zap for that thing to go off. And you're getting it when you're disconnecting a 12-volt battery in the ground. So what in the world? Repeatedly, yes, thank you. It was, and Travis mentioned that you were able to repeat that over time and time again. So, I mean, I remember seeing you watching you down there disconnecting that thing, and each time you did, beep, you'd hear that thing go off. I mean,
and it wasn't consistent. The other thing was too is like half the times when I disconnected it, it would go off, and then there were some times when I would connect it back up that it would make it go off.
No.
So it went back and forth between the two. It's very baffling.
No, it sure is. Man, that's really wild. And then with the Tesla coils, when you guys were doing the Tesla experiment, which I thought was fascinating too, being able to build up that much. I think I heard Dragon say something about he said something about 1 mil. I'm trying to remember exactly how much it was.
Over 1 million volts.
1 million volts. Thank you. I thought that's what he said. Yeah, I was afraid to say that for a second in case I was wrong, but I think
just to see sparks and everything going off or just so on TV anyway, you're like, wow.
Yeah, significant. And that signal that they were getting, and I had a picture of it that I talked about when I was recapping that episode. They were talking about that one particular spike you were getting. And if I remember correctly, that spike even continued. Caleb was showing that to Travis, and that spike continued after the Tesla coil was turned off. Did we get that right out of the episode?
So I'll just be honest with you. I'm not positive about that. I don't want to answer because I'm not sure. I can't remember how that, we do those experiments, and there's so much going on. And so a lot of times in these experiments, we're all tasked with watching or doing a different part.
Mm-hmm.
And so, literally I will be focused on what I'm doing. They're focused on what they're doing. And the problem with that is that when something happens, then you run over there and they try to explain what was, but I wasn't witness to that particular thing because I was busy doing my assigned task.
No second set of eyes to see it happen.
Yep.
Yeah. So I can't speak very educatedly to that question, unfortunately.
That was interesting, but I mean, being able to, it just goes back to prove the fact that, and you guys were successful, I think, in proving the fact that the ground not only can have this current going through it, but it also can build up that charge, and then it's going to have to dissipate at some point. And then when it does, that's sometimes when things happen. But what you think about what the material makeup of the ground. Now, I know when you guys were drilling in the triangle area, and the first time you drilled and you got out about 24 feet or so and you hit water. And I know Jack was talking about this. Jack and I were talking about this earlier. The flow of that water, which seemed to be something that was picked up when you had the, I'm at a loss for the word, but when he had the drone flying over with the scanner on it.
Oh, the magnetometer. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Magnetometer. And so that indicated that there was something happening underneath, or something taken, there was something underneath the ground there at the triangle area that was showing up. I think it was showing up blue on the magnetometer. But then you hit that spot, and even the guy Zach, I believe it was, that did the GPR, he came up with something there as well. And then you drilled and you find the water. Was that an underground stream of some port or source? It looked like the water was actually moving.
Well, so there's two parts of that. Like, underground aquifers, underground water is really not that anomalous. Even out here in the desert,
right,
you have underground streams that are carrying. That is frankly something that we need to investigate it a lot more. We didn't spend much time. We were so focused on trying to get to a depth of 100 feet. But that's definitely something that we need to look into more, because there's obviously, like I say, there are a lot of underground streams and that wouldn't be. But the interesting thing is that with the magnetometry readings, and see, that spot was right where James Keenan independently had come up with his own readings, and his were based on a much larger area that spanned tens, if not more, miles to the north and south of the ranch.
Yes, I remember that.
And so, and James is of the opinion that there's actually a large underground cavern that is traveling that distance. So is that what we came upon, or was it something like we definitely need to go back and with the focus of trying to understand what exactly was that? Was that just a regular stream going under there, or is there something more? So that's something that I think is still on the checklist of things that we need to follow up on and look at a lot closer.
The reason I asked that question so much is that one of your first days when you put like 45,000 gallons into that one hole, and then put the dye down, and then you couldn't find anything. I mean, you literally could not find any water on the ground or anything. And
I never did.
Water at 23 feet, I thought, well, wait a minute, what's going on? Is this where it went?
Right. Well, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we were allowed to dig a little bit. I am superstitious about the digging, but I don't have a problem doing it. And so when they brought us out that excavator, I'm grateful that we can start, but I looked at that excavator. I'm like, this is 2 steps up from a shovel. So I would like to go in there with something much bigger, because it's frustrating to just peel back that onion one layer and not get an answer. I want to go if we don't find it, let's go deeper. We actually, that dye that we put in there picks up really well under UV light. And so for weeks after doing that experiment, after we were done filming for the day, us guys, after the production crew had gone home, we'd get our UV lights and we would go down along the river. We went over to the well, we went to the cistern at Homestead 2, and we would check under UV light at night to look for any traces of this dye. We gave up, I think, after about a week and a half, 2 weeks. We never did find it. So something would indicate, I'd like to go deeper in that spot, to be honest.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Then I just found, I did grab that picture, and I'll bring it up just briefly here. Talking about those points that he had taken. He had not taken any readings on the ranch, of course, because, probably because he wasn't allowed to be on the ranch, but
Correct.
South of the ranch and then north of the ranch. And sure enough, that line extended right through the triangle. So yeah, that, to your point. Yep. That's very interesting. And then, of course, that's when you guys were out there and taking a look at that spot. That's and somebody asked me, he said, oh, that's not necessarily a triangle. It's because of the roads going around it. Well, yes, the roads are making the triangle. It's the area itself. You guys just happen to call it the triangle because of the roads there, is my assumption. But, they're like, why are everybody keep talking about triangles on Oak Island or whatever? It's like, it's just because of the roads. It's just the area. Don't think about it as you guys named it that, but it is a significant spot. Now, wasn't this also the area where, when you did the balloon launch, and didn't the balloon basically extend or fly up over that area as well? Was that kind of what we got from the show?
Yeah. So that the reason why the triangle, and you're right, it's just named that because we drove there. If it was a square or circle, we'd call it out at the square or the circle. But
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that spot keeps drawing us back. Now, I will tell you personally, I've had 2 personal experiences. This was before we ever knew there was anything significant about the triangle.
Really?
The triangle happens to be the same spot that I had 2 different instances of hearing a voice.
Oh, wow.
One of the scariest experiences I've had on the ranch came right there on the triangle. It was early when Brandon bought it. One time I was out looking for a trespasser, and it was the dead of night, 12:30 at night, and it was in the summer. And I got out there, I was in my vehicle, and I heard a voice, an audible male voice, tell me to stop, don't go any further. And at that point, I didn't really think much about it. Being religious in our faith, there's the still small voice. I mean, this wasn't a still small voice, but you just think, it's just a warning. I got out, shot a few shots of my shotgun up into the rocks to scare whoever was up there. And then I left and didn't think anything of it. 6 months later, I'm out there pushing snow with my skid steer.
Mhm.
And this, again, it's probably 1:30 in the morning. It's snowing lightly. It's beautiful. We have a lot of snow. But I got out there with my skid steer, and it took 4 passes for me to get this road plowed out.
Mhm.
And I got to that triangle spot, and I heard, and this was the machine making a lot of racket. I had my earbuds in listening to an audiobook, and I heard that same voice tell me, stop, don't go any further. And I turned around at that point, didn't think anything of it. I pushed the snow back to the ranch house. I'm coming back to my 3rd pass. I get to that point, and I thought, this is all in my head. And I just kept going. I only made it maybe 100 or 200 more feet when I started to have a neurological effect. And I say neurological, I started shaking uncontrollably. And I had the most terrifying internal fear I've ever experienced in my life. I literally felt like something was going to jump out and eat me. I hear the Harry Potter and the Dementors. That's kind of what I'm thinking, this Dementor where it sucks the life out of you.
Yeah.
But I could not get off the ranch fast enough. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my entire life.
Yeah.
And as I got out to the edge of the ranch, I got off the place. I continued to uncontrollably shake for 12 hours after that. It was well into the next day before the shaking finally stopped. So that happened there at the triangle. Then season 1, we triangulated that these strange signals we're picking up were coming from a spot about a mile high, but right above this triangle.
Right.
Which the mesa it sits right at the base of this mesa.
Mhm.
And this is the same spot of the mesa that we have several eyewitnesses as well as camera footage showing the mesa itself glowing. So we set this weather balloon off. Now, to give you an idea, when we let the weather balloon go off, we actually went down to the bottom of the field because there is a set of power lines that goes across on the north side of that triangle, right? Just to services the ranch.
Yep.
And we obviously didn't want the balloon to get caught up into that.
Mm-hmm.
So we went down to the bottom of the field. And when we went to let it go, we had a pretty good west to east wind that was blowing. And we were joking. I told him, I said, it's going to be in Colorado before it even gets up to that 5,000 foot mark. We let that go. And sure enough, it started to blow towards the east. But as it went up, it curved back almost as if it was in a vortex.
Wow.
And it went right dead up through the center of that, right above that triangle. And that's also, when it got to that exact point, is the last ping that we got from that GPS.
Yep.
That hardened GPS monitor is the last time we heard from it.
Wow. And that was about 5,000 feet again, wasn't it?
It was it was almost exactly at 5,000 feet above that mark.
See, that's just weird. And that's why I keep saying, and as I got into the show, I liked the show. And then because obviously we started off, we talk a lot about Oak Island, but I liked the show. And I thought, we need to, do some looking into this show and talk about it because there's some really interesting things happening there. The more I watched the show preparing for doing the recap of season 1 and all that, the more I just got so deep into this and I just had to know more information, which is, again, why I reached out to you to have you come on and explain some of these things like this to us. it's really remarkable that all the different occurrences that are happening, and that's just another one right there. Somebody had mentioned in here, I think actually it was Linda. She said the reactions are not specifically within the triangle itself. Is that correct? I mean, you get some reactions just outside of the triangle, obviously, as well. Homestead 2 being one of them, I think, that we talked about. It's not surely confined just to the triangle. Some of these weird anomalies. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have anomalies that have stretched the entire ranch. So
Mm-hmm.
we have some over on the easternmost side of it, which we call the Eastern Valley.
Yep.
Then there is a ton of not only have we witnessed things there at home, what we call Homestead 1, which is where the caretakers live and where the command center's at.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's where the Shermans live. There's all kinds of things that have happened right there. I personally have had a crazy experience just where Travis's trailer's at. There's a mesa right behind it.
Yep.
Matter of fact, if the view behind you, it'd just be to your immediate left. And right there on the mesa, I've had an event that involved my cell phone going crazy, our ranch dog having a reaction, and then a flashlight right there. So there's been a hot spot of things there. And then you go further across, you got the triangle. That's been a spot. There's a spot down on the south side, down by the creek, just directly south of the ranch house. That has been the reported area of a lot of happenings, especially with the Bigelow people. Mm-hmm. Then you go out to Homestead 2, and you've got that whole area. And then there's another homestead over there, Homestead 3, which we really haven't done anything at.
And we don't hear much about that. Yeah,
we've never heard of it on the show, I don't think, even.
But you ask any of us on the ranch team, most of us, like, that's the place I least like to be. I mean,
oh really?
I don't like to be over there at night. It's and we've, I've, as a ranch manager, I have a little I've been able to bring some intuitives on there as part of the investigation, and it's interesting because different intuitives are picking up the same things there, and they don't like that place either. So it seems to be so Homestead 3 is a place, and there was supposedly, we have reports of Bigelow's team witnessing portals opening up right there by Homestead 3. So it's across the whole ranch.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, and you talk about an experience. You've had several out there, and being a paranormal investigator, which I've done a lot of investigations with that. When you have a paranormal investigation, and this is something that Matty Blake was talking about. He does the Drilling Down show for Prometheus. He and I discussed this a little bit talking with him, and he said, he talks about it, paranormal investigator to being a paranormal experiencer. Because once you experience, like you did with the voice telling you don't go any further, once you have an experience like that, it changes you forever. I mean, you are changed from that point on. And I've had a few of those that did the same thing for me. It's something miraculous that when you hear a voice, and I have heard voices like that. Oh, you had a voice in your head, but you get those voices, and I tell you, it changes you. It really does. And and speaking of that, you just recently, and I love these, by the way, you just recently did a video, and I think you had it on Ryan Skinner's. I think it was up on Ryan Skinner's Facebook page. And Ryan's another one. I want to talk about Ryan a little bit too, but where you were actually out on the ranch and you were by yourself. You're cruising around in the side by side, and you're doing some work out there. You're opening irrigation valves and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then you were also out there at night going around. I got to tell you, honestly, knowing all the things that are happening on this ranch, are you packing heat? I mean, are you a little nervous about being out there at night like that going on? And I'm not talking about people that would try to sneak on, which quite honestly, folks, stay the heck off from it. So stay away from the ranch. Quit trying to go on there. It's private property, but anyway, with that said,
Thank you.
It is. It's private property. It's against the law, and it's just not the right thing to do. Stay off the property. But the fact that you're out there at nighttime, knowing all these things are going on, and you're just casually, oh yeah, okay, I'm over here doing this. Man, I don't know. I'd be a little apprehensive about doing that. You don't seem to be affected by that too much. You have a job to do, obviously, and you're going to do it. But man, oh man, does that bother you?
Boy, I feel like I got to sneeze here for a second. So I actually enjoy. I'm a creature of the night. I do my best work at night. I'm not afraid of the dark. I love my solitude. And one of the things I love about the ranch, I go on there, that gate shuts closed, and it's like shutting me out from the world. And I tell people 9 out of 10 times that ranch is so peaceful and serene. And I just absolutely love being out there. Yep. When I first went on that ranch, I just believed it was just another piece of dirt, that there was nothing unusual. Then yes, things start happening. I'm so stubborn and I have a very analytical mind, that I was able to write, oh, that's just a coincidence. Oh, that could have happened anywhere. Oh, I write it off. And then they start to pile up. Then my injury happened. And, people ask me all the time, why you still go to the ranch after all you've experienced? And it's a fair question. But we have pretty good, there's individuals that have spent quite a bit of time there that have left the ranch. Trying to rid themselves of this hitchhiker effect that it's been called.
Yes. Yep.
And it not only does it not go away, but it almost seems like it intensifies. And I tell people, kind of half jokingly, half serious, going on that ranch is kind of like joining the mafia. There's only one way out. And I think the biggest thing for me is I think before my injury, there's almost that sense of invincibility. I mean, at perfect health, I'm young, I'm not thinking about my mortality at this point. And you experience this where you're facing death. I mean, there was a point during my injury that the doctor's preparing my wife for the fact that I may not pull out of this. And if I do, she'll be feeding me through a straw for the rest of my life. And then the thing, I tell people there's the physical side of my injury, and then there's the psychological things that took place during the same time that I haven't come to terms with and I'm not comfortable talking about. But the one thing that it did do was, in a way, it forces you to accept the fact that you're mortal. And this all ties into your question on the ranch and the fact that how can I be out there? Well, I've come to the conclusion that whether I'm out there or not, I don't know what, it's your time, and there's nothing you can do about it. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. Now I will tell you this, I have, this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but I don't even care at this. Like I'm to the point with this place. I don't even care anymore. I've established this relationship with the ranch, and you kind of get a feel. I joke with my wife. I said the ranch is kind of like a woman, and when I show up, I never know what kind of mood I'm going to find it in. And there's some days.
I'm sure she loved that analogy right there.
There's some days I show up and she's in a good mood and I'm happy to go on the ranch and I feel safe. There's other days I show up and I'm like, okay, I need to be very cautious today. Like the smallest little thing I do could set her off and she could, kick my ass. Then there's some days, there have been days where, matter of fact, I take care of all the facilities. There's been a few times where I've shown up, whether it's to irrigate the land. See, we only get our water turn. It's a set period of time each week. Wow. And out here in the desert, water is more valuable than gold. And so we get our water starting at 7:45 p.m. on Monday night, and we get it until 8 a.m. Wednesday morning, whether we take it or not. Wow. And if we don't, it just goes down the ditch to the next guy. Right. And so when you're trying to take care of 500 acres and keep it from burning up in the heat, the water is very precious. And there's been a couple times where I've shown up, and the thing is we don't have enough water to water all the places at once. And so you start at one end of the ranch and you will water that field. And when it gets watered, you turn it off, you move it down to the next field. And that requires me to be out there at all hours of the night. And that never bothers me. I actually enjoy it. But there have been some times where I've rolled up, it was time to change the head gate, shut this one, open that one, and I'll roll up to that gate, and the hair just starts standing up on your arm, and it's the most evil, foreboding feeling. And it's just like, I don't care if the ranch burns up, I'm not going on there tonight.
Yep.
And so you develop this relationship where you kind of get an ebb and flow of, I should be here, I shouldn't be here, I need to be cautious, I need to be alert. And so I go out there, and as long as the feeling is okay, I feel fine being out there. I love being out there. There's sometimes, matter of fact, this past week was one of them. I was out on the ranch. I got done watering. I actually went over and I laid down on the helipad and was just staring up at the sky. It was just incredible.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh my God.
And I was there for about 30 minutes, and then the feeling on the ranch started to change. And it happened pretty quick, and you can feel it. And I was like, okay, it's time to go. And so you get in and you leave. And I've learned that as long as I'm paying attention and being attentive, I can avoid a lot of problems.
And that's so true. I know what you mean by that. I really do.
Now, are the other people as in tune with that as you are, or is it because you're there so much?
It's a good question. Like Dragon, I mean, we joke with him. He's alien repellent, because the rest of us, I think the rest of us could literally be sitting there getting zapped, and he'd be looking around and saying, "What's your guys' problem?" You know, he seems like he's immune to most of this stuff. Even it's funny. Even in the episodes, there's a couple times that personal issues that required him to be away, and then all of a sudden stuff just starts going haywire, and he comes back, and we joke with him that he missed it. So I think some of the caretakers, there's been times where they've been on the ranch and they just have to leave and go get a hotel and stay off the property because they don't like what they're feeling. Caleb has gotten to where he's pretty cautious and in tune with it. Eric is very, I love Eric. He's such a scientist. He's so analytically, so disciplined.
Yep.
But there's a side of him where he accepts and he's open-minded that maybe there's stuff he doesn't understand. And he himself is very in tune with that. So I think the problem is some of us are more sensitive to it than others.
Yep.
I don't know that Dragon has to be that in tune, because I guess the ranch is scared of him as well. I'm not sure, but
I know I would be. I'm a little intimidated by him, I can tell you.
One of the things I really was impressed with as we've gone through season 1 and season 2 is the way that you've come together as a group.
Oh yeah.
And you work together. You're working separate, but you're working together, all for a common cause, and then bring everything together. And that seems to have been a big thing this season. Yep.
With the exception of Travis, the core team's been together since Brandon bought the ranch. Now I'm kind of the outsider because pretty much, Caleb is too. Caleb's actually my brother-in-law, married my younger sister. So we needed more help in the security area, and so I brought him on. But with the exception of that, all the rest of those guys, whether it's Brandon's relationship goes back 25 years or more, and Candace went to school with them. Oh, wow. So Jim Morse was Brandon's first client. So,
oh, really? Wow.
Or I should say maybe Brandon was Jim. Jim was developing a high-rise tower, and here comes this 18-year-old kid wanting to be a real estate broker. And so Jim gave Brandon his first shot at doing Class A. So they've got a long history together. And then I've only been in the picture for the last 5 years, but we care very much about each other. Mm-hmm. We're good friends on and off the camera. And Travis coming in, it was a little shaky at first, but that's just the male egos, right? We're all trying to figure out where we fit in the picture. But I love Travis to death. He's been a great fit, and we complement each other really good.
Yeah, you all do. And then like Jack was just saying, you guys have gelled as a team, and that helps you to work together. And because now you're sensitive to each other's personalities and feelings. Like when you're starting to get a feeling of something, everybody takes you seriously. It's not one of those things, whatever. take you seriously on it. Same thing with Travis. And, and you look at that the more analytical mind, and not to say that you don't have an analytical mind, because you can tell that you do, because you guys are all researchers, every one of you, Dragon, you, Eric, I mean, you're all part of this research, which, quite honestly, a lot of us are envious of, because we'd love to be out there helping you and experiencing some of these things too. But, it's that team aspect now that you have come together, and you notice that when you have a team, like let's talk about the Rockets real quick. Bringing the Rockets out there, you tried the experiment in season 1 where you shot the rocket up. You didn't really get to collect a whole lot of data from that, but there's that UAP that shows up, right? And everybody sees it. You're all standing there by the helipad and you're watching this UAP show up that's just photographed. Then you decide in season 2 to let's step this up big time. And I got to say, I love your quote that you did on for that too. It's like, who doesn't love rockets, right? I mean,
right?
That's a perfect quote, because I'm thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
we don't know when you filmed them, but it was right around the 4th of July, so that was kind of apropos for everything.
Yeah, I came out around, the 4th or 7th or whatever. Yeah, the 7th of July. I came out right after the 4th. We're thinking, hey, that's great. They're shooting rockets regular. But you stepping that up, and now you're doing the rockets. And before we get to that part, which I want to talk about a little bit, you had the experience with David Barber, I believe was his name, was getting the experiences. So because you guys are a team, and you talked about this beforehand, before you got started, you were all under the canopy there, and you're like, hey, if you feel something, talk about it, bring it up. Don't be shy. Let's, anything, whether it's visual, whether they're feeling or a mental, whatever if you're feeling, hearing something, bring it up and talk about it. And he did. Can you tell us a little bit about his experience? I know there's probably more that happened than what we saw on the show, but what was your take on his experiences that he had?
Yeah, well, I'll just say I'm grateful that he did. People need to understand, when we bring these experts onto the ranch, for a lot of these guys, like, it's their first time of being on national television. This is a chance for them to showcase their company. This can be a big deal for a company to be able to be on a national platform, right?
Absolutely.
And so we've brought companies out before, and we always run them this routine, but there's so many of them. This is their chance to look professional. It's their chance to showcase what they can do. And it's very frustrating for them if they come out and here's their big chance and their equipment's not working right, or they're feeling funny and they don't want to look like a baby on television. Dave, as we're carrying the rocket up, and he's all like, I'm glad somebody else is feeling it, because I don't feel like such a nutcase. So to their credit, Lock Precision was one of the coolest people. I mean, we brought a lot of great people out on the ranch, but Lock Precision, Dave and Alan, all those guys, like true professionals in every sense of the word. We not only blasted off the rockets that you saw on television, we did a whole bunch more that didn't show up.
I had a feeling.
Yeah, it was a really long day, but those guys, I can't say enough good about Lock Precision and the true professionals they are. So for Dave to come on, to be honest with what's going on there. So we're up there, and yeah, there was a lot that went on there that didn't make it on television. So for example, Dave described it as like being in an MRI machine and feeling like the iron in his blood was being pulled out.
Wow.
That was Dave's description at one point. Is he said he felt like he was in an MRI machine and that the iron was like trying to be pulled out of his blood. You could see it so clear as day. His arms were nothing but goosebumps. And mind you, I mean, it probably was like 90 something degrees out there. Yeah. It was hotter than
it wasn't for a chill. Yeah.
Sweating. Yeah. It was not because we were chilled at all. But the interesting thing about Dave is that he starts having this reaction, which is fascinating that it's affecting him. Here, I'm known to be very sensitive to this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not feeling it so much. But then shortly after he saw like, oh my gosh, guys, I'm feeling this, our meters did start picking up spikes. So the meters started to go off that backed up and verified what he was feeling, which was really cool. It's always validating when you have a science instrument, say, yeah, what you're feeling is there's an explanation.
Yep.
Then at the same time, another interesting thing that happened. So while all that's taking place, we start having a meter that starts doing the little siren, like the little alert. We can't find what the heck is causing this. We literally went through every rocket. Like we were tearing open all of our totes of supplies. We searched for like 15 minutes trying to find this instrument that is
going on.
Going off.
Yeah.
We never did find it. We could
Wow.
never find this. We literally looked everywhere for and it seemed to be coming right there under the tent. And that's the thing we couldn't understand is like, here's this instrument that's beeping an alert. We never found it. And
Wow.
that happened at the same time. But they say we searched for 15 minutes. That's too long to show on television. They just cut it all out. But this is all going on while Dave is having this reaction. So pretty significant.
It is very much so.
Yeah. And the launch pad that we are set up on is literally directly above the triangle. I mean, we are right there.
Yep.
And so for him to be having this, eventually we ended up sending him off the hill and bringing somebody else up. But yeah.
Is he okay? Have you heard from him after the fact? I mean, obviously this was last year, but I mean, did he, we talk about the hitchhiker effect. I mean,
right.
is he okay? I mean, did that continue or is he, do you know, or can you say?
To my knowledge, he's fine. I haven't spoken to him since last year, but I think Dragon's really good at keeping in touch with people. I think him and Dragon have kept in, but we came down and he seemed to be fine when we left. He was there the next day as we were cleaning everything up, getting ready to send him back, and he said he was fine, seemed to be fine, but it definitely shakes you up.
Oh man, yeah, I can only imagine. And we touched a little bit on and I was just realized, man, I'm so enthralled by all the stuff you're telling me. I completely forgot about some of the questions. So we're going to get to some of these questions, folks, in just a minute. Just bear with me a moment. We got about 30 minutes so I'd like to try to limit these to 2 hours. But I've just been fascinated by all the information you've been imparting with us. So, but I did want to bring up about Caleb and his phone. I know that people would love to pitch in if we need to pitch in and help him get a new phone or get his screen replaced, the glass replaced on his phone with being all cracked. It was cracked in season 1. It's still cracked in season 2. But the phone itself, first, let me ask you this. Does anyone else's phone get weirdness happening like this?
Yeah. So last year when the whole cow thing was going on, Caleb's phone starts going crazy. He's got an iPhone. I have a Samsung. I think season 1, it was like a Samsung 9. It was whatever the newest model was at the time.
Right.
So I have an Android or a Samsung. And then I'm trying to remember if Travis's went to, Eric had an iPhone 5 that has gone issues. Matter of fact, you see some artifacts. Eric was able to get some screenshots of his. That's the whole magnet buildup in season 1 when Eric brings out the magnet.
Yes.
Show Eric, show him what's in the case.
Yep. Yeah.
But that's one. Eric's been able to reproduce what he saw on his phone with the magnet. But I think that was an iPhone 5. We had another Android that went completely haywire that Eric has retained, and Eric does a forensic where he literally took the phone apart piece by piece. He's a plasma physicist, electrical, and he tests each component in the phone, the capacitors, all the little chips. He did a thorough forensic analysis on that phone, was able to isolate where the problem took place. Caleb's phone, same phone. We actually were with him, like we were all together on a group on Monday on the ranch, and Bryant was just Dragon. He's just like, Caleb, I swear, if you show up with that phone on television again, I'm gonna take it and throw it in the river. Like, I'm so tired of hearing people say, "Can we just get Caleb a new phone already?" But Caleb's a very frugal guy. If it works, he's like, if it works, I'm going to keep using it. But the interesting thing is he only ever has malfunctions like that when it's related to the ranch. And the other thing is people say, well, it's because it's got a cracked screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something. If all I got to do to hack an iPhone is crack the screen, and then I can bypass their security code and get right in, then, you know, that's the easiest hack in the world. And I'm sure Apple wouldn't be happy about that. Yes, maybe the cracked screen makes the phone more susceptible. I don't know. But the cracked screen does not explain his phone turning itself on. Mm-hmm. It doesn't explain bypassing his security code.
Yeah.
You know, that's happened multiple times, and there's been multiple times where his phone's not the only. You've got his iPhone, you've got my Samsung Android, and we've had others there as well. Electronics is something that we deal with. Electronic malfunctions is something we deal with all the time, which goes back to the whole electromagnetic interference that Eric was talking about with the magnet.
Right. I was watching, I'm members of many of the other Ryan's group and some of the other Skinwalker Ranch groups. And I was out there, and this was just yesterday, and I saw, and this was, I believe it was Vicky Bushert had a post out there. And I believe it was on Skinwalker Ranch on Ryan's site. And she said, I was mad to get that I haven't thought of it. Because it's a brilliant idea. She said, has anybody thought to take and record his phone acting wonky from start to finish? Just record the entire thing. Because Travis had mentioned one time when you guys were moving the rock that was the coordinates from the Sherman family, and you guys were moving that rock out of the way. And I think that he had mentioned, or it may not have been that episode. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but he had made a comment that maybe they're trying to talk to us. And then somebody else said, well, maybe they're trying to warn us. So the idea was that you record what's happening on his phone and then try to you take it slow-mo and find out, is it really some kind of a code or is it really somebody trying to reach out to us? Has there been any thought to anything like that? You know, kind of looking at, if you ever saw the movie Contact, you know, when there's a signal within a signal that they had to decipher and pull it apart to get to the true message that was in there. Is that something that, has anybody thought of anything like that with his phone?
Yeah. So we've talked about that a bunch. Mm-hmm. The hard part is when it happens, you don't have control of the phone. So you have to have have to have another device that can record it.
Right.
And so obviously when we're out there filming and something like that happens, you have the camera guys that run over there and they start to watch it over the shoulder. Mm-hmm. And so we actually have a lot of that on film, but from start to finish, well, we have to finish, but sometimes we miss the start of it trying to get a camera guy to come over.
Exactly.
I think that, I think it needs to be looked at very carefully, because the whole question is that a total random thing? Like, why are those specific apps being opened? Why are those bump numbers being pushed? There has to be some rhyme or reason as to why that function is taking place. Right. I would think.
I would think so too. And it's happening so fast that you can't, the numbers were just scrolling by at a point you couldn't thumb it that fast. There's no way. And it's like, like she had said, record it, put it in slow-mo so you can see exactly what numbers are being pushed in what sequence. And maybe there is a story there. Who knows? But yeah, I thought that was a very, very cool idea. And like I said, when I read that, I was like, why didn't I think of that? That was, that's so significant to the whole story, I think. And I thought that, when you're out and, and I love when you do your video out on, you went out and you explained the whole thing about the cow that died last year. And then people were saying when they saw the hide, and I forget who that was, the guy that came out to take a look.
Taylor.
Thank you. Yes. And it all of a sudden now it's brown and they're like, oh, no, it's a different one. And you got on and explained that. Thank you for that stuff. I mean, that it kind of leaves that up for us to ask those questions and then get it out to the public as best we can on these shows like this one, to explain. But thank you for doing that. But when you're out on the ranch and you're doing the when we talked about earlier, when you're opening the irrigation valves and irrigating different areas of that, and you're out there at night, have you ever thought about like wearing a cop, they get those cam, have you ever thought about that? I mean, you're an investigator and you're also susceptible to all these different things going on there, and you can feel the ranch. And believe me, I am a believer in that. I don't think that was crazy at all when you're talking about that, because people are very sensitive to these things, and you apparently are. Have you ever thought about wearing a body cam I think the public would love to see that. Now, Prometheus might not like you doing that, but have you ever thought about that?
Yeah. So yes. And matter of fact, we've talked about that at length as a team.
Mm-hmm.
It's overwhelming because we have a list a mile long of things that we should be doing, but we're limited by manpower and time. And so there's so many of these things we're like, oh, we should do that. But then like it goes along and it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
And I have to say, if I have my one big regret on the ranch is because I came on not taking the place seriously. If I could go back and redo anything on the ranch, it's that I would have been much more meticulous at documenting these incidents.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot of these that now I will say when something happens, I've been very good about telling Eric. So there is record and Eric is meticulous about documenting it. Mm-hmm. I wish that I would have, and it's something that I'm doing right now is I'm actually going back and trying to document, but there's so many details that are lost going back after the fact. And so the body cam thing, that is something that definitely we've talked about. And that's something I'm hoping that we go from talking about it to actually doing it. There's just the logistic sides of it. We literally are taking on terabytes of data every month, and it just becomes overwhelming with the amount of data that we have. So adding in more, it's something I might do personally. I don't know, but you're right. Like it's something that should be taking place.
Yeah, we'd love to see that. And that kind of information is things that we, and again, I being a member of that group, I get to see when you post stuff like that out there. It's really interesting, but we get to see a different side of things that we don't get to see on the show. And even though you were driving in the side by side out there with your phone, I'm assuming you were using your phone to record that. Yeah. So, I mean, even though it was still interesting, I was enthralled just watching you and what you were doing out there. That kind of information is invaluable. And at the same time, if something were to happen, some sort of an experience, you see a UAP or you see a portal open that Travis is telling he's getting in trouble with his mom because he's like, if a portal opens, I'm going in there.
Right.
I'm one of those people that probably would too. But I mean, if something like that happened, you'd be right there. You'd have the camera on, boom. You could document this as it's happening. Like when you guys did the experiment, when you did the rabbi's recording of his tonal chant that he was doing. It was really interesting when he did it, and the anomalies you were getting on the thermal imager, that was, and that looked like a portal opening up in Homestead 2. I think it was Homestead 2 building right there. But you and I think it was Caleb were up on the ridge, I believe, and you saw when you were doing the recording portion of it, you saw a light or something happening. Was that, if I remember correctly, you saw a light first and you were telling the guys on the ground, there's something going on behind the corner of the homestead. And so everybody focused on that point. And then you were going out in the field and watching with the night vision camera. What was that all? What was that? I mean, was that, could you explain that to us a little bit? What was happening there?
Yeah. So that was the repeat of the experiment. Obviously the first time the rabbi came. Now here's some things for your viewers. It's the first time that we did that experiment. It was pretty warm outside, and we saw the thermographic change, and we actually walked down there, and I'm not kidding, like it was bone chilling from the core. It was just like instant cold straight through you, like a humid cold kind of where it goes right through you. But it was instant. You just walk straight into it. The second time, the problem with our cameras, we were all set up across the canal there, and we were observing. We had a very 2D dimension, from the cameras. So the second time we did it, we set it up so that we had cameras looking more from the side, and then that's why Caleb and I went down on the road. Is I wanted to be down and have a different view of it so that we could see more from the side than just looking straight at it. And the second time we did it, I believe the thermometer, it shows there, like it was pretty cold. You'll see we all have jackets on. It was 40, I think it was 47 degrees when we did that experiment. And the opposite thing happened, right? We see a pocket of warm air come in. So it was the complete inverse effect that we saw in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb and I are up on the road, but we're looking at it more from a side angle. And the interesting thing is that we're looking through the camera, and I start seeing a flickering taking place back in the back window of the Homestead 2.
Wow.
Except for there's no glass in that window. It's
there's no way to get that reflection.
Yeah. And so, because the way that I was seeing it, it looked like almost like if there was a reflection in the glass, but there was no glass there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what caught our eye. So we go inside, we find that this thermometer is laying down on the floor. You know, how it got down there, I don't know. We didn't hear it crash. There wasn't wind. I can't imagine that it rolled off, because when we set it up, I personally was there when we put that up there.
Yep.
And you make sure that it's stable.
Yep.
Like, I have a hard time believing that it just rolled off.
Yep.
Go in there, thermometer's on the ground, and then Travis is looking out the back window towards the south and sees an object out there. And so I ran out, and I couldn't see anything with the naked eye. And that's the thing, is that most of what we're seeing is not things you can see with the naked eye. I could only see it through my thermographic. And my particular thermographic camera has multiple settings on it. So you can do white hot or red hot, you know, the settings with the color variations.
Yep.
My camera was set on white hot. So what I was seeing was a white object.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran down through the field, and it was going towards the south. And then when I got to the barbed wire fence, I'm looking through there, and I'm not seeing anything. And there was this big white object. I mean, I guessed it to be about 6 or 8 feet around. I thought what I was looking at was a Russian olive tree. And because the trees were showing up as hotter
right
in this imagery. And so I'm looking through, you can't see, it's darker than dark out there. I can't see anything with the naked eye. And so I'm looking through this, and I'm looking, and I just see what I thought was a tree. And all of a sudden, this supposed tree starts to move towards the west. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, that's not a tree. and watch this thing float into the trees. This is a thermographic effect. Like, but it's very well defined in the sense that it's a ball, right? Yep. And it's moving together. It's not dissipating out. This ball is moving and moves into the trees. And then we did pick it up again. Caleb and Travis both saw it with theirs and saw it go through the tree, but those trees are so thick we couldn't we couldn't travel with it.
Right. Oh my goodness. That's the kind of stuff that, see, though, it's those personal experiences that unfortunately we only get a tidbit of on the show. And that's why I love having these kind of shows, because it gives us an opportunity to hear those personal experiences, those stories like that I just can't imagine. To be there and see that for myself would just be it's a life-changing experience. Oh my goodness. So yeah, it just adds to the fact that there is so much happening there. I do want to get to some of the folks. I'm so sorry. I've been so enthralled by everything that Thomas has been talking about with us here tonight or today. I missed some of these, but I did want to ask some of these. And let's see, one of the questions here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to mess up some of these names. It's either Ginny Howard or Jingy Howard. She said hello, of course, and then she was asking about your you and Dragon. How did you get to meet Dragon? Was it after he came to the ranch, or did you meet him somewhere else before that? Or have you known him for a long time?
I met Dragon through the ranch.
Okay.
I came out there, and the first time Brandon came out to the ranch, Dragon was his security detail, and was there. And then, of course, we've had security on the ranch ever since. Mm-hmm. And so I've had the privilege of working closely with him for the last, 5 years.
Yeah, he's great. I really like him a lot. And I like, you see a completely different side of him, you know, watching him on some of the interviews that he's done. We'd love to have him come on the show too sometime. We can join him. The two of you guys come on together would be awesome at some point. And I think that one of the other questions we had that we did get to it. She also asked about we talked about the phone. We covered that already. And then Jennifer was also asking about the water that was picked up in the triangle area that was underground, that we kind of covered on that. So thank you, Jennifer, for that one. There was another one here about this is from Stephanie, and she asked, she said, of all the unbelievable things that happen on the ranch that did not make it past the editing process, what do you wish would have been included? And can you expand on that, keeping within your NDA, of course? What kind of really big experiment or thing that happened would you have loved to see make it to the show that didn't?
I probably can't talk about the one, but I will. I got myself in trouble last year because
we don't want to get you into trouble.
We don't want to get you in trouble.
No. I actually got in trouble with the team, not the ranch team, but the production team, because I tend to be a little outspoken sometimes, more than I have the authority to be. And to answer a question, we had so many problems with drones last year. I think we had over 6 drones that were destroyed in filming last year. And
okay. Wow.
there was one specific, and these weren't just like accidents. This is like messages showing up on the controllers of them being disconnected, and then watching the drone with the self-avoidance and all these things like literally plow right into the ground. We have drone parts at the ranch. Drone
scrapyard. Yeah.
There was one particular one where I felt like it was very significant, and that had to do with part of the backstory of things that had happened prior. So we had this drone crash, and when we do these events, they're pulling us off and we're doing interviews. Like, what was your initial thought?
Right.
We call them on the fly, OTFs, on the fly interviews. And so we're doing an experiment. This drone has some pretty serious malfunctions, and we're doing the interview, and we get done with the interview, and I'm like, aren't you going to ask me about the drone? And they're like, well, it's probably not going to play. And I'm like, what the hell do you mean it's not going to play? Like, did you guys just witness what happened? Like, how could you say? And he's like, well, we've had so many problems with the drones that's probably played itself out. And I'm like,
no,
it's part of the story. Exactly. And look, I want to. We have disagreements sometimes with what the editors choose to put in and not put in, but I have to say they have a hard job.
Yes.
When you're taking hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of footage, and their job is to create a show that brings in high ratings so that we can do it again next year.
Right.
And they are true professionals, and they're just doing their job of trying to do what they think will bring ratings in, because we really have 2 segments of the audience here. We have the segment like you guys that are really interested in this, and you're more into the data. You want to know like what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the segment that they're really not interested. They're coming home from work, they're tired, and they just want to turn on the TV and be entertained for an hour, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they don't really care about this other. And so there's no way they would sit through an hour of tedious science. They just want to be entertained. Yep. So the editors have the job of try to marry those two. Sometimes they do better than other times, but I do want to give them kudos. I think that they do the best job they can. But there are incidents, the drone, answering your question, we've had some pretty incredible things. People always ask, one of my biggest frustrations here with the show, we have what's called the fourth curtain or the fourth wall. That is like the production doesn't exist.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's frustrating because you don't think for a second that it's those 5 team members out on camera. They're the only ones that are experiencing odd things.
Right.
The production has had just as many frustrating things happen to them, but you open a whole can of worms there. if you start bringing that in. So if it happens behind the camera, it's as if it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's
And
too bad.
people ask all the time, well, how come that guy's drone on television didn't work, but the network's drone was working just fine? Well, there's multiple aspects to that. Either that's part of the story. You can have two identical drones. This one won't work and this one will. Well, why? Or there's the stories of like neither drone would work. And so we had to go back the next day and get the drone shots for that scene. And so what you're actually seeing is not in the moment you're seeing, right? There's all the production side of that. And so it's frustrating because there are some pretty significant things that happen to the production side that are not on the show. So.
Yeah, and that's exactly, and that's kind of what this is for, so we can get that information. But it is, and I can only imagine how frustrating that is for them, but also for you guys, because like you said, you're not going to show that. I mean, come on, that was significant, and yeah, wow, and in knowing that the production crew is going to have experiences as well, and I would imagine they kind of get caught up, or some of them would anyway, get caught up in this whole thing. They become kind of investigators themselves, because I know if I was a cameraman doing that, I'd be all, I'd really be very interested in what's going on, as well as filming it at the same time. So, wow, that's truly interesting. I know, and I got to ask Mark, as we're starting to wrap up here. Mark asked the question about your hat. He loves your hat, and I do too. I think that's an awesome hat, by the way. That's So what's with the, and what
it's bull hide.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So it's made by a company, Bull Hide. The funny thing is that the year before we started filming, I was vacationing in Daytona, and I've got this straw hat that looks similar. I look like an idiot wearing it, but I wear it when I'm on the beach. Mm-hmm. And we were in Steamboat Springs at FM Light and Sons. It's a Western wear store. And I saw the hat there, and I was like, I put it on, and I happened to be wearing it the one day when we were shooting the trailer. The producer saw it, and he told me, he's like, you're wearing that hat. And so I was like, okay. But yeah, they're leather hats. They're very nice. They're not cheap, but it's made by Bull Hide. And you just, I'd love if Bull Hide sees us one of these days, if they would send me a free hat, but that hasn't happened yet. So.
Or at least a check in the mail for advertising their hat for him all the time.
I've sold a lot of hats. It's one of the top questions I get asked.
Yeah, I would imagine that's really it's a cool hat, and that's how we know you now. I mean, if I see a picture, I could see you in a picture of 10 people standing at a little bit of a distance, but if I see that hat, I go, oh, there's Thomas right there, because you are that hat. That hat is you. So
that is me, yeah. Well, I buy a new one for each season because they're leather and they tend to shrink with wetting in it and stuff. So I have to buy it. So if Bull Hide's watching this, I'd sure appreciate your people to get a hold of my people.
Yeah, there you go. Let our people
take a free hat.
Yeah, exactly. It is a cool hat. That it is, really is, and I'm glad Mark asked that question. I'm going to try to breeze through these kind of quick here. Brenda was asking she had several questions and she was talking about the rockets. And I think you kind of alluded to this already, that there was a lot of rockets that were shot off that we didn't see. We only saw the certain ones. So apparently there was a lot. I mean, you guys were out there, like 14-hour day or something, I would imagine, from early morning to late at night doing all those rockets. So there was
from early morning to early morning. I think we finished up. That last rocket that we shot off with all the glow sticks ended up landing like 1.5 miles. We had, oh my gosh, we hunted for that thing for like probably over an hour before we found it. And we didn't get that day wrapped up. I think it was like probably 1, 2, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning by the time we got all wrapped up. But we shot a couple of rockets off at dark. I really wish they would have shown, because Precision, they brought these the motors, and they had the accelerant in them burned colors. So we shot one off that was red. We shot one off that was green. They looked so cool at night, just blasting up in the air. But yeah, we shot off a lot of rockets that didn't end up making it on TV.
Yeah, I would imagine. And the data from that, I mean, unfortunately, and that's what's leading us to our next episode next week, is the fact that you got you collected a lot of data, but it didn't look like we've got a lot to give us any answers. And it looked as if there might be a point where, okay, we've got to spend more time in that area, 5,000 feet above the ranch. How else can we do that? And now there was the going to Brandon and asking permission to go up in the helicopter and get that. So, and I honestly would say that as Cameron, I believe, is the helicopter pilot, Brandon's brother. I would be a little. He's even said on the show that he tries to stay away from going directly over the actual the ridge, Skinwalker Ridge, because of the things that happen there. He tries to avoid that. But man, I don't know. I would be a little worried about going up in that helicopter myself. I don't know.
One quick question.
And that's not for show.
With regard to that, with the transponder that they have, you have there, have planes gone over that area, that 5,000 foot level? Have things happened that they've reported back to you that they have felt or anything else?
It's a good question. No.
Nobody said anything. Yeah. Because, yeah, there was one. I was looking at one of the pictures that was on the show that I captured of the I think that's so great that you guys have that, not only when you're shooting rockets off, but to know when you see an anomaly in the sky and go look at the transponder, you can actually see the screen of the planes flying over. But you see some that are flying over the area that are, relatively low. They're 4, 5, 6,000 feet, smaller planes or whatever. And that's a good question. That would be interesting to know if anybody has reported anything weird like that. Another question that Brenda asked, we already pretty much got that. We were talking about Dave Barber and his experiences, and you already alluded to the fact of talking about whether or not that was followed up on, and how he's doing months or so after the incident. Let's see. Oh, and then also we were talking. She asked about. I assume the strange phenomena happened around the triangle as well as in it. Is there something special about the triangle itself that stops at the roads? And I would think not, but maybe with that water feature, I don't know, that underground water feature. One thing too, she asked about the concrete room in the basement of Homestead 1. Or Homestead 1.
Homestead 1.
Did you ever figure out what that concrete room was for?
I think, so honestly, I think it was built to be a water cistern.
Okay.
The thing that made that room unusual is simply the fact that when we found those bones, so there's only one pipe back in the corner. The only in or out of there is just a single pipe in the back, and it's it's I don't know 3/4 1 inch galvanized pipe coming in. So having a rodent in there is not mysterious to me. What was interesting was that you have that pile of bones right there in that spot. I don't know why they were piled up, and the bones seemed to be fragmented as if they had been put in a blender and they were all busted up, broken.
Wow.
Which, if you have one rodent that ate another rodent, okay, I get that. But there was no intact skeletal remains. You would expect that if a rat got in there and eventually it laid down right there and died, and had another something in its stomach, you would see that. But you would at least have the one animal that had the intact skeletal remains, and that just wasn't the case. What we had was a pile of
broken fragmented
rodent bones or whatever. That was the mysterious part of that room. As far as its nature, I think it's just a water cistern. But there is some mystery around that. There are some odd things, but
yeah, that was pretty. Obviously that was in season 1. Going in there and busting a hole in there and getting in, take a look around, and really, what in the world was that all about? But yeah, it makes sense that would be a cistern of some sort, especially if it had one inlet pipe or outlet pipe, whichever you want to look at that inlet pipe coming into it. Let's see. She also asked, can he tell us anything about the do not dig here rock? I mean, it looked like when you rolled it over, there was possibly an image there of the Thunderbird or whatever, but I don't know. I mean, was that pretty much nothing found there type situation?
For me, that was a big nothing found. Now, we're scratching the surface with a little tiny machine that I feel like is just 2 steps up from a shovel. So I would love to go in. If that is a true statement, that's where the Myers told the Shermans not to dig, then my thing is we didn't find anything with the little mini excavator. Let's go in and first of all, let's hit it with the ground penetrating radar one more time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And see if we could pick anything up on the radar, and then go in with bigger equipment.
Yep. Yeah. Very good point. Yeah, because you would want to dig a little deeper to see if maybe something was happening there. One last thing too, and we got to wrap this up. I don't want to keep you all day. I know you got things to do.
No, you're fine.
Was also that when they had out the Sherman's nephew that came and stayed with them, that particular episode, you know, he talked about several things, but I'm sure there was much more that took place. And I had his name written down, and for the life of me, I can't find
Stephen
it.
Wall.
Thank you. Yes, Stephen Wall. What was your impression of him and his experiences? I think he spent like the whole day out there with you, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. No. So Stevens, he came across as a solid dude. My wife actually knew him from school.
Oh, okay.
And there's nothing about Stephen that suggested that he was making anything up. Now, here's some interesting things. When we brought Stephen up to that point, like I hadn't pointed to anybody. I told him that the triangle was where I'd heard those voices. I mean, as far as like, there's no way publicly that Stephen could have had access to that information. We have him in the UTV. We're rolling across the ranch. As we drop off the canal into the triangle area, his exact words was, "This is where the crazy stuff starts to happen."
Really?
And I'm like, really? What do you mean by that? And he told us the story of him and his uncle Terry being right there at the triangle. They would have been probably at the spot where I turned around with my skid steer when I was plowing the snow, where I started to have that effect.
Yep.
He told a story of him and his uncle hearing a loud voice as if booming down from heaven.
Wow.
So he had several experiences of hearing voices. It was very validating to me. And here's bringing on a guy who knows nothing of my experiences, hasn't been tainted with them, and he's sharing this.
Mm-hmm.
So he's solid. The one thing about Stephen that we had to keep reminding ourselves about is that he was 10 years old at the time that a lot of this was going on, right? So you're getting a recount of experiences, of recollections of a 10-year-old child.
Right.
And even when I take myself as I've got 3 sons as a parent, if you have traumatic things going on and you're trying to protect your kid from being, and Stephen had already at that point, he'd had some traumatic things happen in his life. That's why he was living with his uncle and aunt. Mm-hmm. And so here's this child you're trying to protect. Some of the explanations he was giving us, from my point, came across as that's what an adult would be telling a kid to try to, it's kind of like, "Oh, honey, it's okay. Like, there's nothing to be worried about." Right. Obviously, an adult is not going to be telling a 10-year-old child, like, "Oh, crap, the dog's just got zapped," right? So it was fantastic having him on. He's one of the first-hand eyewitnesses that we've been able to get on the ranch, that was there at the Sherman time, that's not under a non-disclosure. And so his recollections were invaluable to us. And yeah, he was there all day. I felt bad that more of his recount was not shared publicly on television. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll be able to flash back to some of that.
Yeah, hopefully. And I know some people had said on other sites and we're talking about the fact that, it can't be, what he's saying can't be true because the timelines don't line up or whatever. And then on the interview with Dragon that he was on, I heard him mention about when they were in Homestead 1 in the basement by the I guess he had stayed, that's where he slept, was in the basement or something. He was talking about that. But he had actually said, I wonder if this is still there. And he talked about there was where he put his name on a piece of so like a wrapping on a vent pipe or something. He had written his name there, and sure enough, they went and looked, and there was his name and the date. So that's something that we didn't see on the show, but it was given validity to the fact that he really was there, and he very well could have had these same experiences as a 10-year-old. But again, like you said,
absolutely. And I'll tell you, that's not like that's people. I don't even understand that math because see, my wife was born in '85, and I believe her and Steve went to school together because he grew up here in the area. She knew him as a kid, but the Shermans bought the ranch in '94.
Right.
Okay, so he would have been 10 years old in '95. It matches up perfect with what he said. And then they ended up selling the ranch to Bigelow in '96, but Bigelow kept them on the ranch. Now, I think if I remember right, they moved off of the ranch but continued to run it.
Okay, yeah.
And I may be wrong there because see, the new caretakers that Bigelow brought on, I believe, moved on in 2000. So there's a chance. I would have to ask him. See, I'm not positive, but they were there from '94 to at least '96, and then they continued to run the ranch up until 2000. So the timeline matches perfect. I don't understand where people are getting off on their math.
Yeah, I don't either. And that's again that's those times where I love. And again, I mentioned this earlier when you come off and you do one of your I'll call it a cameo or whatever. When you come out and you do a video of your own and you post it on there, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I wish that some of the other guys would do the same thing, but that's invaluable for the rest of us because we're getting an inside look at some of this other information, and being able to see the ranch through different eyes. I mean, we're seeing it through Prometheus's camera eyes all the time, and sure, yes, we're getting a good view. I'm not going to discredit them at all. They do a great job with this, but when you do those little videos on your own, I think it's fantastic. And I encourage you to continue doing that because I find them fascinating.
They are fascinating.
Really we'll keep doing them until they tell me to. I'll keep. I have a YouTube channel and putting them on. I'll keep doing it until they tell me to turn it off, I guess.
Oh, you do? You have your own YouTube channel?
Well, it's just, I mean, it's only got 4 or 5 videos on it. There's the cow and the whole explaining that head that was in one of the episodes.
So. What's your channel? Was it your name or?
It's just my name.
Okay, so folks, look for that out there. If you haven't seen it already, go check that out, and hopefully we'll see a bunch more videos.
I will keep putting them on until they tell me to stop.
Yeah, because it is really good. And for those of us who are truly, truly interested in what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch, I look forward to stuff like that because I want more information. I really do. We've had a fascinating time with you today. And again, I don't like to drag these too much over 2 hours. There's so much we could go on and on talking about Jim Morris and everything too. Oh, the alpacas. I forgot. Thank you, Linda. Linda just reminded me whatever happened with the alpacas. That was something I was supposed to ask and I wanted to find out.
We found them a safe home off the ranch. So
good.
Okay,
they're off in happy pastures somewhere else.
Okay. Did you ever figure out what attacked them? Was that ever found out?
Yeah, it was tribal dogs.
Okay.
There's a pack of tribal dogs that were running around, and now there were some mysterious circumstances surrounding the whole attack and everything that we could get into, but as far as like what it was, it was just a pack of dogs.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we were concerned about that too, but we're really glad that they're safe. I know quite a few people did ask about that, and Linda just reminded me the alpacas, and I thought, oh yeah, because I had it written down in my notes to ask about that. So, but anyway, so thank you so much, Thomas. Boy, this has been fascinating. And like you said earlier, if you could come back on the show at some point, it would be fantastic. We'd certainly
love to have you back on.
Yeah,
we'll drag Dragon on here.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Oh, that would be great to have both of you on.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to have him on the show and talk to both of you at the same time because and I know this is something I'd love to joke around about stuff and have a good time with things. But I try my best not to with this show because of the fact that I know that what you're doing out there is a serious research event. It's yes, you can have a good time. You guys can laugh and joke and stuff once in a while, and so can we. But we don't want to take away from the seriousness of the research that you all are doing there. It's very important, and we want to get some answers, just as much as you guys do, I'm sure. And so I would love, again, if you could come back, and if you can drag Dragon with you, we'll set it up at some point and talk about it. But again, thank you so very, very much for coming on the show with us here today. It's just been an education for all of us that are interested, and we just I can't thank you enough. I know we could go on and on for another hour or so, but I don't want to do that to you. And again, it's hard for people to sit and watch a show for more than a couple hours anyway. So we'll wrap it up and call it a day. But again, thank you so much, Jack. Thank you so much for being
Thank you,
co-host and the good questions you've had. And
Thomas, thank you so much for being here.
Yep. Fascinating stuff. And even Eric, I mean, if Eric wants to, I don't know. I've never seen Eric doing public appearances other than on the show. So I don't know if he's into that, or even Travis himself. If Travis we'd love to talk to him. I've actually attempted to reach out to him, and even Brandon, but I've gotten no response. So I thought, okay, I don't bug people. I'll give it one try. If I don't hear back from him, I'll leave it alone. But yeah, if you ever talk to him, say, hey, yeah, I had a pretty good time over on Jeff's show. So we could.
Yeah, no, Eric loves talking to people about this stuff. I'll reach out to Eric. He doesn't do social media and all that. He keeps a low profile, but he is very dedicated to it. And so I'll ask him for you.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, folks, thank you so much for being here today with us. We've had a great afternoon with Thomas Winterton. Is it superintendent? Is that still your title on the ranch superintendent, or is it evolved from that?
It depends. Like ranch manager, ranch superintendent.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well,
I tell him I'm glorified janitor.
No. You're a researcher.
Make sure the gate opens and the toilet's flush. I mean, that's
no. You are a true world-renowned researcher of all things paranormal and interesting like this with UAPs and all that. No, you're world-renowned now as a researcher. That's all there is to it. All of you are, including Dragon as well. So. And we really appreciate it. Again, thanks, folks, for being here with us today. You guys have a great rest of your afternoon. And don't forget to subscribe if you're out there on the YouTube side. We appreciate it very much. All right. Wraps it up. Have a good day. Bye-bye now.